Taylor, so stoked to have you on here, man. Welcome to the Sharpening Strength podcast.
I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk and cover a few different topics and get this thing rolling.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun today, but want to start by if you can just give listeners an overview of your story, both kind of personal background and professional background.
I think the easiest way to start would be a little bit into my childhood, actually, of how things came about to run my business, which is Performance Max, and I predominantly focus on training basketball players. But when I was younger, I took a liking to basketball. Didn't love it, but I enjoyed going out in the driveway, old hoop, just being by myself and working on my game. And it was actually a moment when a buddy of mine and I went to a tryout in 8th grade. And we were both really amped to be there. We were talking about it weeks before, how it was going to be this great experience, that we were going to travel around the country, play all this really good competition. And went to the tryout, and my buddy made the team, but I got cut. And I think it was a big turning point for me, like that whatever I was going to do, I had to put forth my absolute best efforts. And I started getting up before school, getting workouts in. I lifted with the football team just to maximize my ability in the best way that I could. And that led to me becoming a pretty good high school player, and then having the opportunity to be a college basketball player as well. And then during my time in college, people in the community that I grew up in Pewaukee, Wisconsin, started asking me to do little group sessions with 2 or 3 kids and working with players on their skills. And then I was working with a brother and a sister at a park, and it just became a little summer job for me during school. And before I knew it, I got done with school and got done with college, and there was, growing interest. So I had a job 6 to 2 probably every day. I was doing some personal training for adult population, which I enjoyed. But I knew that I really liked working with the youth athletes and high school athletes. So when I got done with my job training the general population or older population, I trained athletes after that. And I'd go 2, 3, 4, 5 hours after I got done with my other job, like I said. And again, demand just kept growing and growing. And I was like, it's time to take a chance on starting a business with this and going all in on it. And that's what I did. And that's what I'm doing currently, and is working with youth athletes, high school athletes, some college athletes, and worked with a few players who have the desire to play overseas or are currently playing overseas as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. And we went to school together and got to know you a little bit through school, but we got connected mainly through your business. I'd say was where you gave me the opportunity to get some training experience when I was just transitioning to PT school, and just loved the community you were developing there and the athletes you were getting to work with. And I was thankful enough that you were able to take me on and give me some experience in that sense too.
Yeah, I mean, that was, and I think it's all going to connect today too with some of the topics that we're talking about. But in college, I was studying exercise science, and there was a lot of information that I took away during that time, and a lot of valuable things that I learned during school about movement and the body. But again, my passion was basketball, and I really enjoyed it. But I use some of the knowledge that I took from, training different sports and training general population with coaching cues and just interacting with people. And I use it now in camp settings and group workouts. And I still do some strength conditioning for athletes too, most specifically basketball players. But I think everything's so connected. I think, the skill of basketball can greatly be enhanced by being able to move properly and being healthy and being strong and being fit. And, the more force we can produce, the more force we can put into the ground, the better athlete we're going to have. And it all connects. I mean, just with coaching, with being able to move better, and then sport too. And that's where I think I found my niche a little bit, and I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, it's so cool what you do, and getting, thankful for the time where I got to kind of learn and mentor under you, and what you do better than a lot of people I know. And where I want to kind of take this interview today is like you talked about, the the X's and O's of getting stronger, doing those things are super important. But there's a lot of people that can get someone stronger, get them faster and do those things. But it's different to, especially when you're working with more youth athletes, to have influence over them, to actually coach in a way that communicates caring for them, yet inspiring them to be better, and actually getting them to follow through with those things can be a much harder thing than simply what we learn in school of like, if you do this many sets and this many reps, this will happen. So I want to talk a little more on the influence side of things and the coaching side of things that you do so well. Cause I think there's such a myth out there today of influence being number of followers and how big of a following we have. We look at the influencers quote on social media and we're like, man, I want to be like that, where they're able to impact so many people. But, and you talked in your book, Leave Better Than Found, that influence doesn't have to do with how many followers you have or how many things. And I want to dive a little deeper into that. What does influence really mean to you, and how is it different than how maybe society perceives influence?
That's a great question. I think you eloquently stated that. It, you know, just to kind of go back a little bit too, even with the story aspect of it. When I was 25 years old, I got diagnosed with testicular cancer, and I ended up having to have some chemotherapy during that time as well. And I think I was just going through and doing everything almost subconsciously or unconsciously, even as a coach. I just was doing however I had been coached. I was pretty much just doing that as a coach in my time. And my passion fueled me, and I think it allowed me to stay afloat for a long time. And having knowledge obviously helped too, but it was that knowledge and passion. And I didn't really understand the science of coaching. I didn't really understand you know, I think I understood the art just naturally of coaching, but I don't think the science of coaching was something that I really studied a lot, and how to be a better communicator, and using language powerfully. But during that time, I really started to understand what what passion can do for you as a coach, and combining passion with knowledge, and that can help impact people. And a lot of people wrote me letters during my time with chemotherapy, and a lot of my players, sent me powerful messages that it made me even more motivated to become a better coach. And it made me even more motivated to grow myself even more, to impact even more people. And I think, to your point, a lot of people want to have this huge following, and they want to, be the person on Instagram who has 100,000 followers. And to me, it's more important that we understand that we can make a huge impact with wherever we are and whatever we're doing in that moment. And when we do that over and over again, people realize it, even if we don't realize it. And that's ultimately what my point is that I didn't realize that I was having an impact on people. But then when this, time period in my life happened, and I got cancer, and I had to have chemotherapy, and I had to take a break a little bit from some of the coaching that I was doing, and people took time out of their lives to write me a letter or send me a message or give me a call, I realized that, I was having an impact. And, looping it all back around, I think that time just showed me that we don't need to strive to be huge influencer. We don't need to strive to have this massive following. If we're really good at what we do, and we care about what we do, and we live it with passion every day, that's going to come. I mean, influence is going to come when you do your job extremely well, and when you care about people, and when you build relationships with people. And I think that's a message that, can resonate with anybody, because we all want to be instantaneously gratified. We want that overnight success. And we think that the people who have the 2 million followers are the people who own the most influence, and their platform's big, but everybody has a platform. And when we dominate the platform that we have, our platform gets bigger, and we organically can start to influence more people.
That's so great. Yeah. And I think we see these big accounts, and we assume that they have more influence, and we also assume that they're happier with life, or they're like, oh, that's what success looks like. And it's easy to hide behind these accounts. And like you said, they can be putting out information, but you can influence more people in your direct location or whatever, like you said, whatever mode you have, than some of these big accounts that might be putting some stuff out for a lot of people to see, but how much is it really connecting with them, and how are they really living out their lives in some of those other ways too.
No doubt. And I think that's another thing with leadership for me is you got to live it, like as a coach. And my players, I know they're going to be able to see through me right away if I'm out here giving them a message and I'm not living it myself. And I'm a big believer in modeling the behaviors you wish to see. And it's not to say that people who have, you know, big accounts, it's bad. I mean, that's okay if you have thousands and thousands of followers, and, but at the end of the day, I think the people are going to know. People are going to find out about you, and if you're real or not at some point. And if you're living the behaviors that you are preaching, people are going to be a lot more likely to listen to you, and you're going to be able to have more of an impact and more of an influence. Model the behaviors in which you wish to see in other people. I'm just a big believer in that. Sweat equity is something I believe in as a coach. Is, again, don't ask somebody to do something that you're not willing to do yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And modeling the behavior, not skipping steps. We want the fast track. We want everything expedited, that instant gratification you talked about. But to earn the true influence in those things, it'll, like you said, it'll just happen. It's not something that we can necessarily shoot for. I want to. So you mentioned, from during chemo, you got these letters, and you realized maybe you had the art and the passion of coaching, but you mentioned something about the science of it. Is that something that was that a turning point to turn leadership and the coaching into more of a, I guess, more of a study, more of a science? And how did you go about that? Or what do you mean exactly by that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I probably didn't explain it great when I was talking about it, but I was just operating on passion, and uh, I think that can get you places. I mean, it's a great starting point. If anyone's not sure, just attack your day with passion, and I guarantee to at least get you the door to open in places. And it, the art part of it is, I feel like I've always been pretty good with other humans and interacting with them, and just being able to have a conversation and ignite interest in some way, shape, or form. But the art of coaching is like figuring out, or the science of coaching to me is, and I guess it's a little bit of the art too. And I think we both would agree there art and science can kind of interact with each other a little bit. But to me, I look at the science of coaching like when to cue somebody, how to cue somebody, um, what words you're going to say in your cue. Uh, the communication side of it, I guess, is the word that I'm kind of going for when I say science. Is like, how do I, what's the right way to communicate? What's the most powerful way to communicate? Because I think high clarity equals high performance. And again, for me, like it was all passion. It was knowledge of the game that I had, but now it was like I needed to figure out how to be the best possible communicator that I possibly could be. And people might be listening and saying, well, science would be just knowing your stuff, and I agree with that. But I do think there's a little bit of a science to coaching too, and a science to communication, and just how you deliver your messages. And I think that's ultimately what I was getting at. Is passion got me through the door. Passion got me my first, round of clients, if you will. But me progressing as a coach is what has allowed me to grow my business in the last few years, for sure.
I think that's a great point. I think that's overlooked. And whether we're talking coaching or business leaders, fathers, we can apply this to any area of our lives. But would you say that that making that a conscious effort is something that's overlooked? 'Cause I think a lot of times we look at something like our athletic careers, and for you as a basketball player, you work on all your footwork and your dribbling and different shots from different angles and these things. But then we get into coaching, we're following our passions, which, like you said, is a good start, but we're not thinking about those things. We're not thinking about, well, how am I standing when I cue this person? How, like,
Exactly.
tactile feedback, what verbal, what's my tone like? What am I, there's all these other things that we just assume should happen naturally. But would you say that's an overlooked part that we should have some more conscious awareness of?
No, I think you nailed it. I try to study that stuff. I mean, I'm very confident that I know the drills that I want to do. I know the material that I want to cover during a practice. I'm very good at writing out my practice plans, but those little things, like you said, where you're standing, when you're going to give feedback, if you should give feedback, does it depend on the athlete? Does it depend on the team you're coaching? Does it depend on the age you're coaching? What's the goal of the session? What's the goal of this team? Is it an extremely competitive team that, every single minute detail really matters? Or is it a youth team that they don't want to hear your voice very long? They just want to play. They want to learn. They want to figure it out. So I think all those things are things that I've learned are more and more important as I've done this thing. And you have to have a feel for it. But I think it's important to understand those type of things too, and plan for those things. Like when I'm writing out my practice plan, and when I'm writing out a workout plan, those are things that I'm taking into consideration. Is it the first practice or is it the 12th practice? Because the first practice versus the 12th practice, or the first session versus the 12th session, you could be doing completely different things. But I think you have to be aware of it, and you have to be conscious of how you're coaching, and in each of those sessions, in each of those moments. And those are things that as coaches we should be thinking about and planning for.
Yeah, definitely. Is this something that now if you're saying you're studying it, and I know how much attention you pay to this. Are you looking at, like, are you reading books or following other coaches, or is this all based on experience you've had, or where are you drawing some of these things and studying them from?
A little bit of everything. I mean, trial and error for sure. I go back after every practice and every group session that I do. I write notes on how that session went, what I did well, what I thought I could improve upon. Uh, what course the session took. Was it, did things go south after I gave, after I had a stoppage of it and I tried to explain something? Or did, things continue to get better because I just shut my mouth and I let them figure it out a little bit? So I'm always reflecting. So some of it is just, me doing it and then having conscious reflections afterwards, and seeing what I did well and what I can do better. Another part of it too is I read a lot. I try to find different books, different people who have been doing this a lot longer than I have, and not just basketball coaches, but coaches in general. It could be any sport. It could just be leaders. So I think it's a blend of everything. To answer your question, it's not just one way that I'm trying to study this and one way I'm trying to learn. I'm just always trying to grow as a person, as a coach. And then I think, again, like, passion gets you in the door. But what you do after that is really important. And if we're not all striving to learn and not all striving to grow at everything at the thing that we're doing, and everything that we do, I think we're missing the boat. And I think we're doing a huge disservice to the people that we work with. It has to be a conscious effort to get better every single day at what we do.
Yeah, it's so well said. I love your attention to detail and doing those things. And I know, I know you in terms of how much you want to get better, but I know the reason behind how much you want to get better is because of the impact you can have on these athletes you're working with and these things too. It's not a self-serving motive. I just want to get better for the sake of getting better, but it's that continual reflection and tying it back into, okay, when I'm in this situation again, I hope I can better help this out. Cause there's also the myth that we have to get it all right the first time. And we think like, oh no, like I messed that up. I should have known that. But I continually I look back a year ago, I look back 5 years ago, and I'm always like, oh, I wish I would have done this with this person. But I say we do the best with what we know until we know better, and then we have to do better with it. But that takes that reflection and that growth mindset that you're talking about.
Yeah. Uh, I try to, every morning, right? Especially right now, my routine's been a little bit different, but every morning, uh, there's some type of reflection that I'm trying to have. I have a journal. I do it in my iPad now. I used to write it out. There's arguments on that. Like, do you handwrite? Do you do type? Do you type it out? People got different philosophies, and I talk about it with people too. And there's definitely something to be said about handwriting stuff, but I just found that it just took me so much longer. So now I have a couple journals in my iPad that I try to attack every single morning, whether it's writing about leadership, whether it's writing about things that are happening in the world, whether it's X's and O's, whether it's just coaching philosophies. And I think it just helps me, take on some of the information that I'm receiving and filter it and put it in my own words and to help me understand it at a deeper level. And like you said, it's the reason behind it is because I want to be the absolute best I can be at what I do for the people that I get the opportunity to interact with and work with on a regular basis.
Yes, and that's awesome that you're doing that daily. Is that something you've always followed, or is that something more into the coaching and getting in the science of it, or is that something you've always naturally gravitated towards?
Both. I think, I do more of it now, just because I want to be a better coach, and uh, I want to have clarity. It's a word that I keep coming back to all the time. And I heard a guy named Phil Beckner. He works with um, some basketball players. He works with Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum of the Blazers, and he said high clarity equals high performance. And it resonated with me, and I keep coming back to it. And I think to be more clear with our athletes, we have to be more clear with ourselves. And so I've always done some type of journaling and writing. Like, even when the time that I was getting chemotherapy, I tried to be intentional about writing down 3 things that I was grateful for every day. And they were tough circumstances, and it's not something I wish for, but like when I look back at it, I was at that stage of my life, I was probably the most grateful, and I had gratitude flowing through my heart more than any other stage of my life. And there's something to be said about that, like just being intentional every single day with how you wake up and how you attack the day, and what you think about and what you write about, and how you set your mind for that day.
I love the high clarity equals high performance quote. And that's something I haven't directly heard. And I think we know what high performance is. And I think I know what you're getting at for high clarity, but do you want to talk a little more on the clarity side of things? Because I think the mistake I fall into is a lot of times I think I'm being really clear, but that doesn't get interpreted as clear. And it's not enough to just have self clarity. Can you talk about what clarity means to you or in the athletes you're working with?
Me too. I mean, I'm the same way. I know sometimes I could say something in one sentence that I end up saying in 5 sentences, and I'm probably doing it right now to some degree. Like but we're having a conversation, we're talking. It's a podcast. It's not meant to be a 10-minute thing, but when I'm coaching a team and when I'm with a group, less is more to me. And if we can give our message in a short, compact form, in a short, compact way, and still get those instructions across, get our message across, I think we should be striving to do that. I mean, nobody wants to hear a rant or a lecture in the middle of a practice, in the middle of a session. So as a coach, I think if we can learn how to speak in bullet points, to cue in bullet points, and not have to take 2 or 3 sentences or 4 or 5 sentences, or even worse, 2 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs to explain one thing, I think we're helping our athletes out, and we're helping the people that we get the opportunity to work with out, just to enjoy the session a little bit more, because they're going to be doing more instead of having to listen to us all the time. So high clarity means to me is if you can say something in one sentence, say it in one sentence. Like get it done that way. It doesn't have to be where we ramble on for long periods of time to get our point across and to show how much knowledge we have. Say what you need to say and move the heck on.
Yeah, that's something I've learned the hard way over and over again. And there's things that, especially getting out of PT school, it's like want to show people how much knowledge I have. I just want to talk and like show people how much I understand. And I would give this big explanation of what's going on for them, and they would just glaze over, and it's like nothing. And I'm like, but wasn't that so well said? Yet now I the more I simplify things down, you get people to buy in, you get these things, and it comes at the expense of I'm not inflating my ego either. And those things that I thought were so necessary early on, but that's I think a trap a lot of us can fall into.
Like I said, me too. I mean, there's not a doubt in my mind that I hope that I've improved. I hope I continue to get better. But I know when I first started off, there were times that I just wanted to prove to everybody how much knowledge I had in my noggin. But it's so important to filter that information and to put it into clear terms.
And what are some other nonverbal ways we can create more clarity? Is there anything you've gotten into on the nonverbal side of things?
It's a good question. I think one thing that another phrase and that I love is coaches have body language too. And people may not always believe what you say. They might not always be hearing what you say, but they're always going to believe what you're doing. And body language is a part of that. And I think as coaches, we have to be intentional with our body language, no matter who we're working with. And I think that's the biggest thing for me is making sure that I'm like in a game situation when I'm coaching a team is making sure that I'm displaying strong body language. And if I'm throwing my hands in the air and if I'm slouched over on the bench or, if something happens in a game and I immediately put my head up like this and I, have a big reaction to it, those send strong messages to your players. And like, if you're a person who's trying to instill confidence in young athletes, you doing those things is going to take away from their ability to be confident. And you might think that, the words you're saying are, I'm instilling confidence and my belief is to instill confidence in the coach, but your actions and the way you're doing things, even in a nonverbal way, can tell a completely different story.
Yeah, I like that, and especially the example of when something bad happens, and sports an easy example for that. But whether we're again business leaders, whether it's family, whether it's just
Yep.
life, these bad circumstances are gonna happen regardless. And how do you either with yourself or with your athletes talk about dealing with some of these negative circumstances as they come up?
Like, so I'm a phrase guy, and I maybe people are getting the hang of that now. Like, I try to first, I'm going to see if I can say a phrase that just is that one sentence that can explain it. But life is 10% what happens to us, 90% how we respond. My grandfather had both of his legs amputated when he was 75 years old. He and I got to go through that with him. I got to see it. I got to see how he responded to his circumstances that most people would consider are extremely negative and extremely adverse, and they were. And he didn't wake up one day, not one day, of just being in self-pity and feeling sorry for himself, and he just attacked the day. And I think when we are faced with negative circumstances, the more we sulk in self-pity, the more we sit and feel sorry for ourselves, and the less we just go out and take action, I think the worse things become. So my thing in times where maybe things aren't going our way is to maintain discipline and to lead with action, do something and remember that your circumstances don't have to define you, that we have the ability to define our own circumstances, and things may not be going our way, but what are we going to do about it? How are we going to respond? And again, I think that phrase, and my grandfather said it, life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we respond to it.
That leaves a lot of room for us to be in control in how we're impacting others in those ways. In terms of, so we talk about, and I know you speak a lot on positive mental attitude and these things that go closely with relating with the negative circumstances, and how much when you talk about just like taking action and doing these things is more the problem you see in taking the wrong action or delaying and taking action. And when you talk about uh, with your response, just taking action in some way and not being still, are there common problems you see or solutions that you tend to see with that?
Yeah, definitely. Another phrase, another quote. 80% of the people we complain to don't care. 20% are happy we have a problem. Uh, it's like, I think a lot of times we get caught in the trap of just mindlessly talking about our problems. And in order to fix any problem in our life, and again, positive mental attitude to me is not the absence of struggle. It's not the absence of adversity. It's not the absence of stress in our lives. Everybody is going to have days where they wake up not feeling the best. They have issues going on in their life. They're being hit with adversity. But positive mental attitude to me is taking ownership in that time and to identify solutions. And it's like I said, people don't care that you have problems. The world doesn't care that you have problems. And sadly, some people are probably happy that you have problems. So, what are we going to do to take ownership of our life? And what are we going to do on a daily basis that allows us to attack our problems and to attack the difficult circumstances that we have? Are we going to, again, sulk in self-pity? Are we going to feel sorry for ourselves? Or are we going to wake up and take action? And I think you asked at the beginning, do people take the wrong action? Yeah, probably. I think action could be that we mindlessly complain. I think it could be that we tell 7 people about our problems, and during that entire time that we're telling all of these different 7 people about our problems, we never once identify a solution. So to me, it's like, identify your problem, identify the root of the issue, and try to find a solution to it. And that's the difference between mindless and mindful. And that all ties into a positive mental attitude. It's not, positive mental attitude is not just happy-go-lucky, fake it till you make it. I don't believe in that. We're all going to have problems. We're all going to have issues. We're all going to have stress. It's how we respond to them. It's how we deal with them. And to me, it's learning to become more mindful as opposed to mindless.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm sure you see that a lot in the athletes you work with. Is it's bad things are going to happen, and in sport, especially in business, bad things are going to happen, and in life, bad things are going to happen. I don't want us to think we're just talking to coaches at the sport level, although this is very applicable in that sense. But what do you see from the athletes you're working with in terms of, from an attitude standpoint, of what are some of the attitudes that do you have a pretty good gauge on who's going to excel from in their sport from an attitude standpoint, and what some of those attitudes are that you tend to see as patterns?
That's a great question. Yeah, I definitely think there's patterns, and I definitely think there's things you see in certain instances and certain circumstances. There is, anybody who is a coach and deals with youth athletics, the famous phrase is, "My coach sucks." Uh, Again, there's no ownership there. There's finger pointing, there's blame. It's mindless. It's not mindful. And you know what? There are coaches who suck. You and I would both agree with that. Like, there's people who don't do a good job. There's business leaders who don't do a good job. There's managers who don't do a good job. But again, if that's how you're going to attack that problem, good luck. You're not going to get very far. So yeah, there's definitely patterns, and that's a common one, is, immediately pointing the finger at somebody else. There's also other common ones I see, that you have some of the most coachable kids who are eager, ready, and willing to accept any feedback that you give them, and they are going to take it, and they're going to hold on to it, and they're going to live and die by what you say. And there's a big responsibility with that too. Making sure that you as a coach are delivering the right messages in a clear manner. I think of a story all the time about a particular kid that I spent a lot of time with over the past probably 8 or 9 years. He was a young kid, and fifth or sixth grade is when I started coaching him, and he was brutal. Like, the type of kid who was long and gangly, and he just really, his skill wasn't there. He wasn't coordinated yet. He was just kind of clumsy, but he was so coachable. I mean, and he showed up, and he was consistent. I mean, he didn't miss workouts. He was ready to absorb anything that you gave him. And every year he got a little bit better, a little bit better. And by the time he was a senior in high school, I think he averaged like 25 points a game and 15 rebounds, and he's playing Division I basketball as a school paid for. Just stories like that, kids who are there's patterns with that too. And it might not be that it culminates in a Division I scholarship, and it might not be for the average person that you having a good attitude every day means that you're going to become the CEO of a company someday. That's not necessarily how it's always going to play out, but you're going to be able to enjoy the process a lot more if you attack things with a good attitude every day, and you're going to grow. And I think that's what we're all striving to do as humans, is to become the best version of ourselves. And when we have the right mindsets, and when we, don't immediately point the finger, and we don't mindlessly complain, and we identify solutions, and when we, take control of our circumstances, I think we're going to find a lot more joy in our lives too.
Yeah, and I've seen that time and time again, and the people we get to work with, and even my own life with the things that I willed so much to happen and wanted so much to happen, and when we get too caught up in the outcome of things, it's easy to distract from the process of it, which is really where a lot of our growth happens, I think, and not so much in the times where I've gotten cut or didn't get the starting role, or things didn't happen in business the way I wanted, or things didn't happen in relationships and things. Those things end up being we can learn a lot from those things if we're willing to, again, be mindful, be aware that there's other things that we still develop from those situations that we can use later in life.
Absolutely. One of my favorite books is "The Obstacle Is the Way." Is the Way by Ryan Holiday. It's what it's about. That we in every struggle there's opportunity, and if we can look at adversity as a catalyst to our success, instead of it being permanent failure, or us not being able to rebound from that situation. Uh, it changes the game. I mean, there's no doubt. In every experience in our life, there's always something we can learn from, and there's always something that we can take away from it.
Yeah. I haven't got a chance to read that one yet, but that's highly recommended. I'm gonna have to bump that one up on the book list. I know I've read one of his other books. He's got some good stuff. So I want to circle back to you mentioned feedback though when we were talking in our last point about people that are coachable and people that are learning. I want to talk both on the side of, as a leader, giving feedback. So how maybe some ways that you effectively do that, because like you said, is a lot of responsibility. And then how do you seek feedback as well? Is that something that's only done internally, or do you have some external resources or people that you seek feedback from as well as a leader?
Giving feedback, I think it goes back to that high clarity. Trying to speak in bullet points as much as possible. As far as seeking out feedback, I'm always open. And I actually do. I ask players all the time, like, at the end of a season, what I can get better at. Sometimes in sessions, if I know players really well, I'll ask for their feedback. I'll say, is there a better way we can do this? Because a lot of times, again, I don't view titles and positions as the end game of leadership. Like there's other things that go along with it, like we've hit on a little bit already today. I learn a ton from my players and from people that I get to work with, and I'm always open to their feedback. And a lot of times I seek it out, and I want to know, because they're the ones doing a lot of the activities that I'm prescribing. Is there a better way that we can do this? Is there a better way that we can set this stuff up? Just like in a business, I mean, is there a better way we can structure it? And just by you asking questions to them, it shows them that you care about their opinion. And not only do you learn, you also create more trust, and you create more buy-in with them too. So if there's one way that I try to get feedback, it's I just ask questions, and I'm not afraid for them to give me an answer. And I'm not going to get defensive if they tell me, hey, that practice layout today, I don't know what you were thinking. I don't know what we were doing with this, and this. Like, I can't be defensive. If I'm going to ask them those questions, I have to be completely open to that feedback. And, I try to be, I definitely, I think it's something that I want to keep getting better at, but I want to continue to be open to feedback. And I may not take it, I may not, it may not be something that I apply right away, or it might be something that I need to think on, but there's times too, it's just like, yeah, that makes perfect sense, and I'm going to apply it immediately too.
Yeah, I like what you said of being able to take the feedback, not get defensive about it. And I think as a leader, it's either important though to clarify that, to accept the feedback and give a reason why we don't, or sometimes we do have to implement that and show that their opinions are important. If we're always asking it and never applying anything, it's like, well, he always asked me for for help, but I've never seen one of these things implemented. I think either have to be explaining as leaders of, hey, I really like that idea, but this is why it might not work, or this is why we're doing it this way. And it creates an education point too.
Absolutely. No, you're exactly right. Because there are times where you see things completely different, and they don't understand why you see it that way. And it, exactly to your point, it opens the door for that conversation. And it's something even in the world right now. Like, if we seek understanding, we oftentimes find understanding. And if we're willing to ask questions, and we're willing to have conversations, and we're willing to leave the door open to discussing challenging things, and we all can learn, and we all can get better from it. And I think you're exactly right, as a coach and as a leader. And, we should open the door for feedback. And if we don't accept the feedback, we explain. If we don't think it's a good idea, or if we have different intentions with what we're doing, we tell them that. We tell the people that we're leading, or tell the people that we're coaching, the reason why. And then it creates that learning opportunity, and they understand why we're doing things a certain way at a higher level. And again, maybe you create more trust with it.
Yeah, I think we have to keep coming back to clarity too, especially since you mentioned that. That's something that those times where we can better and more clearly discuss and talk on our vision and where we're heading in the direction, and why we're doing that. And I think the times where, as a leader, when I haven't done that regularly, are the times where there's been a lack of clarity, and then people don't see the big picture of why we're doing what we're doing. It's easy to get lost in that. And then people don't see the importance of it. And they're like, well, this is stupid, or I don't see where this fits together. And I'm just doing this task to do this task. And it can create some disconnect between coach and athlete, or business owner and employee. It can create a lack of trust, and kind of some resentment if that stuff isn't clearly communicated.
I'm going to ask you a question in return. So how do you guys, like, when you first meet with a client, do you have like individualized plans that um, you go over? Like, do you clarify a vision with them before you start?
Yeah. So on day one, we're in the first session, and we're spending upwards of at least usually 20, 30 minutes talking and getting history, and talking goals, and talking other areas of life that we don't associate with our pain, stress, and sleep, and those things. And once we identify what goals are, and not just the surface level goal of like, I want to get out of pain, but like, what are we actually trying to get back to? Then we can lay out a plan. I didn't start and do this as much early on, but realize the importance of laying out at least general expectations of, hey, here's our general timeline. Here's our goals, with your goal being this is what we're going to have to do to get there. And we can't say with certainty that we're going to get there by X date, but the more clearly you can lay that out, the more buy-in it creates, I think, on the other end.
Yeah, totally. I think that's such an important, just to always be having those conversations about where things are going, where things are headed, clarifying that vision for yourself as a coach, and for the people that you're working with too. And I mean, every organization in the world talks about clarifying their vision, and making sure that everybody understands what the vision is, and where things are headed. I think it's so important to lay that vision out, and to be clear with it, but then commit to the action every single day. And there's so many things too. And I wanted to say something too off of your point of, yeah, maybe the initial goal for a lot of people is to get out of pain, but there's so many other factors that go into it. And I find that with athletes so oftentimes is that they tell me what their goal is, and they think that just doing the skills that I'm potentially going to work with them on, or if we do some strength stuff, like they think those are the only two things that are going to get them to their goals, when in all actuality, like, there's way more to it. Like, are you sleeping enough? Are you eating right? What are your interactions like with people at home? Like, how good of a teammate are you? There's so many things that go into it, and helping people see those things as well too is a huge part of clarity. Is like, you have to make it known what it's going to take to get there too.
Yeah, I think a couple good points there, and the one being that it's so easy for people to get caught and having goals are great. I think we both agree on that. But too tunnel visioned on a goal of, say, easy example, I want to squat 2 times my body weight. So what are my squat workouts going to look like? What are my leg workouts going to do like? And that's addressing a significant piece of it, but that's such a small piece of how am I eating? How am I sleeping? Am I mentally in a state, and is my environment setting me up for success in getting to that goal? Cause those are all things that most people know how to, generally speaking, there's a lot of intricacies with coaching and fitness and programming and those things, but for general fitness, we overcomplicate things a lot. Like, people know what they need to do to eat healthy and to get relatively fit, but why aren't those things happening? And those are all those other variables that I think sometimes we don't address as coaches, or we don't acknowledge as athletes, or people training to get there.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and it goes back to a little bit too that you and I, and other coaches and other leaders, we know all the the background of it. Like, we know the science of nutrition, but nobody cares about that. Like, the people they just want to know the action plan of what you're supposed to do. Now, is it important to explain to the person why it's important? Absolutely. And will understanding and having the knowledge of the programming and the stuff that, we read in books and the science and all that kind of stuff, is that part important? Absolutely. Because then we're able to give them a clear picture as to why we're having this conversation. But at the end of the day, they just want the basics, and it kind of brings it all back to clarity again too. Like, we have a whole entire book that we could write and give it to them about this, but most of the time they don't really care. They just want to know why it's important and give me something simple that I can follow.
Yeah, and knowing the clarity piece, doubling down on that, knowing who you're communicating with too. Where there's plenty of people, they want the more intuitive types, the engineer types to work with. They want the nitty gritty of, why am I doing this? Why is this structured this way? This says X by 8. What's this tempo mean? And like, they want to know the sciencey stuff of it. And then there's other people, it's like, hey, just follow this and you'll get stronger. And they're like, cool, like, sign me up. I don't need to know anymore. So knowing who you're talking to is a big piece of that, I think, too.
Definitely. Same thing in coaching. You have the same standards, or same thing coaching teams, and working with youth athletes and high school athletes is everyone's a little bit different. You hold them all to the same standard of expectation, and you're pushing them to be as good as they possibly can be. But how you do that could be a little bit different with each person that you're working with.
Yeah. And I like, when we're talking about laying out the plan, though, and the importance of that and seeing the big picture, is a lot of times we're good about doing that in the initial stages, in the, like, start of the year, in the, okay, we're laying out this plan and we lay out this vision. People come in on day one. I don't know if you're the same way. I struggle with the communication of that daily and regularly, though, too. I think is where I think a lot of leaders can benefit from more regular revisiting. Okay, hey, this is still the direction we're heading. This is still why we're going this way. This is still why we're doing things this way. I don't know if you fall into that at all, but that's something that I think we can definitely improve on as a company, and as the with the people we're working with.
Yeah, I do too. And I think you hit it before a little bit. Both of us agree that goals are important to a certain degree. And like we're talking about right now, you have to know where you're going. You have to know what the plan is. Uh, but I think the reinforcement a lot of times for me just comes with the standards, like the standards that and the commitments that we have to uphold in order to get where we're going. And ways that, within teams that I coach, and athletes that I work with, like, we do player notebooks. So I might just ask them a question about, it could be a play. It could be an X's and O's type thing. It could be, uh, it might just be something to open up a conversation about their life. Like, who's your biggest role model? It could be, uh, you know, 3 things that you're grateful for. Just little simple things like that. And, but it also goes into, like, in our last game, did we do a good job of, rebounding? Did we do a good job of, were we great teammates? And then it ties back into the reflection component of how you're doing. But to me, like, we definitely do have to keep making sure that we clarify our vision, and we keep that direction clear. But I am really focused on the standards and the relationships, and each individual and each team continuing to reflect on how they can grow, because I think part of it too is like you have an initial vision at times, but it evolves, and it evolves with the person, and it evolves with the team, and maybe the team starts to realize, like, oh, okay, like, we can be better than we even thought we were going to be. And that can be the scary part about when you tie yourself to a goal, is it can be limiting at times. Is you can limit yourself with goals that you set early on. And that's why I like a little bit more of a broad vision. And then we just like to talk about what standards we're going to commit to every single day. And if we uphold those standards, there's a good chance that our outcomes are going to be what we want them to be.
Yeah, I really like that too. And I think, like we said, goal is important, but we can also, they can tie us down of either it's a fine line of setting, we want these big goals that stretch us, but we also, there's so many things that come up over in athletics. Again, easy analogies of things come up in the season, injuries happen in business, COVID happens, like things happen that affect us. And if we have more of a broad vision, then that makes it a little easier to pivot and adjust to those things. And not to say that we shouldn't have goals, and goals should help direct us, but more the more process based stuff over outcome based stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something within teams that's really important. I think we live in a very result oriented world. I think the average person wants results. They want them fast, but I want my attention to be on, what we're doing every single day to move closer to those results. And it's so easy to sit in a comfortable chair and write out your goals for the year. It's a lot harder to take action. It's a lot harder to uphold daily commitments and daily standards. And I think those are the conversations that, that we're going to be having on a more consistent basis is are you upholding your standards, and are you upholding your commitments?
Yeah. So well said. And I think there's so much great stuff we've covered, from vision and leadership and mentorship side of things. And I know we could talk on this all day, but want to kind of transition here as we wrap up. And when I first approached you with the podcast, told you kind of the vision I had for it, and how I want it to be applicable for anyone that's a leader in applicable in the health and fitness industry and in some of those different areas, but also wanted to tie back into living life as a man is not always easy. And it's there's some myths around what it means to live like a man, and we can hide behind these things and put on the front that we have it all together, especially looking from the outside of seeing someone like yourself of running a successful business and happily married, staying fit, overcoming some challenges that you've already been open about. And it's easy to hear you talk, and with your conviction and the knowledge you have, and think, man, this guy's got it all together and he's got it all figured out, which with both of us would be the first to admit that our journeys and the paths to where we are have been nothing but easy. And we're far from where we want to be yet, and knowing where we have to grow. But if you wouldn't mind being open with listeners on some challenge you're currently going through, or something you've faced recently that's been a major catalyst for a growth as a man across one of these areas.
Well, I appreciate that, Dave. It was pretty nice. Those were pretty good words. If I look like I have it all figured out, I definitely don't. There's a lot of things. I mean, I think I could get into so many different things here. Number one, that I know that, I'm very aware of it. I need to learn how to continue to strive to be more present. And there's times I know I'm good with it. There's times I know I'm very bad with it. We have so much access to information, and as a business owner, we can always be doing something. There's a good chance, though, in many instances, that the email can wait, but our family can't. The people that we care about the most, we can't get that time back, and, I want to strive to continue to be better at valuing the opportunities I have with family and friends, and to be present in those moments. And it's not to say that you're never going to pick up your phone, in a 5-hour time with your family or your friends, but there's things that can wait. And I've learned that a little bit too. And I'm by nature, I'm a very ambitious person, and I want to get things done right away and fast, and always be really quick to respond. I want that to be the image that I portray to people that use me for my services. But at the same time, like, is there really going to be a big difference between me responding to an email within 25 minutes as there is in 3 hours? I don't think so. And if the person needs that response in 25 minutes, there's a good chance that we probably should have had a previous conversation much longer ago about that. So I think that was the first thing that popped into my head when you said that, is just challenging myself to understand what's important, understand where my priorities need to be in that moment. And again, it's not to say that my business isn't important. It's not to say that the athletes I work with aren't important. That time's really important too. But so is our families, and so are our friends. And there's other things in life besides our business. And I'm learning to become more balanced in that approach. And then the other thing that pops into my head too, and it's a difficult conversation to have, and it's a difficult thing to admit right now, especially with all that's happening in the world, is I want to be more informed as a white male who grew up in a suburban community. I want to become more educated and more informed about what's going on in the world. I think there's real issues that need to be addressed. I don't have the answers, but I want to keep learning about it. And I want to keep educating myself, so when I do have a conversation down the road with somebody, that I can be informed and be intelligent about it. So those would be the things that pop into my head.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing both those. I know connected with me personally, and I'm sure a lot of people are struggling with the same things, especially as achievers, and then with everything going on, there's a lot of things that can be overwhelming and frustrating. But I think listening back to all the points you talked on earlier of those principles can help get us through that, of being mindful of those things and taking action where we feel like we need to take action. And all the reflection piece is going to all be big things to do that. So I appreciate you sharing that, though. That's some things that I've struggled with, and I'm sure a lot of listeners have as well.
No doubt. No doubt. And I'll probably continue to struggle with it. And I'm sure there's a lot of people listening, and yourself, we're going to keep struggling with it. But, you said it before, we're all doing the best we can with what we know in the current moment. And we all need to keep striving to get better. And there's no reason why we can't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to summarize for listeners here. So I was taking some notes down as we were listening. I'm trying to narrow down on 3 of our key takeaways. I'll list mine, and we'll see if you have anything you want to add to it, Taylor, here before we wrap up. So high clarity equals high performance. I don't know how many times we said it, but less can be more, and especially in our communication, and that can be verbally, non-verbally. The more clear we are, the more performance we'll see improvement from that. I love what your grandpa taught you. 10% is what happens to us, and 90% being how we respond. I think regardless of where we're at as business owners, as leaders, as employees, as athletes, as coaches, I think there's not a single person that can't take away some key lessons from that. And then also, last thing I highlighted was take ownership. So being mindful over mindless, taking ownership of where you're at, not complaining, not getting caught up in circumstances, but finding what you can do and pushing forward with it. Anything you want to add to that, Taylor?
Yeah, I think those are well said. Perfect summaries. The one other thing too that we talked about right at the beginning, from an influence standpoint, just be really good where you're at. Start with that. Start there. Start with passion. Open the door, and then keep growing, keep learning, continue to be more knowledgeable, get better with what you do every day, and you're going to naturally make your impact then. And I think the easiest thing for me to say for somebody who's striving to make more of an impact, even though they don't feel like they're in a position to impact, is model the behavior you wish to see in other people. And if you start there and you do things because it's the right thing to do, not because you're looking for validation, you're going to organically impact more lives as you go.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, last hypothetical scenario here. They're asking all our guests before we officially wrap up. So let's say you're leaving a favorite coffee shop and you bump into younger Taylor 10 years back. So younger Taylor asks current you for some life advice, looking for just some guidance, looking for some advice and direction. So you're off on your way to a super important meeting. You only have 60 seconds to talk with him. What advice are you giving him, and what are you saying to him?
It's tough. That's tough. I would say I would talk in a lot of bullet points, honestly, and I would let the older Taylor figure it out a little bit. But I would say model the behaviors you wish to see in other people. 80% of the people we complain to don't care. 20% are happy that we have a problem. Life is 10% what happens to us, 90% how we respond. I would say to educate yourself on issues in the world. To be informed as opposed to ignorant. There's leadership isn't a title. It's more about your influence that you're able to have positively or negatively. I would say high clarity equals high performance. There's just so many things that I think have resonated with me when I've learned them, and I wouldn't have like a long 5-paragraph essay to share with older Taylor, or with younger Taylor. I mean, but it would be a lot of bullet points, because I just think that's the way I learn, and it's the way I absorb information, and it's the way that I think, and it's what makes me reflect.
Love it. That'd be an impactful 60 seconds, and I'm sure the bullet points would still hit home. So thanks for coming on, Taylor. Let's wrap up. If someone wants to get a hold of you, where can they reach out to you?
Performance Max LLC is in limited liability company at gmail.com is my email. That's probably the best way. I'm not ultra active on social media. I'm occasionally on there, occasionally post things. If you want to check out the Twitter handle, I believe it is at T Jannsen. I'm not 100% sure that's what it is, but I'm pretty sure. And Jannsen is spelled Jannsen.
And if someone wants to read a little more of something that you've written?
I have 2 books, Leave Better Than Found and Wisdom from the Rocking Chair. Leave Better Than Found was written about 5 or 6 years ago when I was in the hospital having chemotherapy and, fighting that small battle in my life. And then Wisdom from the Rocking Chair is like a little tale, almost like it's a fictional story about lessons that I've learned along the way in my journey in coaching.
Love it. Definitely recommend checking those out. I've read Leave Better Than Found and a lot of actionable things. If you liked what we talked about today, you'll love diving into some of those. So Taylor, this exceeded my expectations. Loved chatting with you and loved talking all these things. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Dave. I appreciate you, man.